Welcome to Online Math. I'm your online math tutor, and today we'll be working on solving equations. For you to solve an equation, we first need to understand what maintaining balance means. We also need to know the inverse operations. Maintaining balance. In an equation, what you have on the left, we call it left-hand side, and this must always be equal to right-hand side. So for example, if you have 4x equals to 8, what you have on the left, we will call this left-hand side, and what you have on the right, we will call this the right-hand side. To maintain the balance, whatever operation we perform on one side of the equation, we must also perform on the other. For example, if we are adding a number, we must make sure that we're adding the same amount to both sides. When we subtract a number, we also need to make sure that we're subtracting the same amount from both sides. And that's the same for multiplying and dividing, that we multiply and divide both sides by the same amount. Next, we'll look at inverse operations. Addition and subtractions are inverse operations. So you could think of them as a pair. Multiplication and division are inverse operations. So here's another pair. Let's take a look at the examples. First, what is the inverse of times 4? Because multiplication and division are inverse operations, the inverse of times 4 would be divide by 4. What would be the inverse of divide by 7? The inverse of divide by 7 would be times 7. What would be the inverse of plus 6? The inverse of plus 6 would be minus 6. And lastly, the inverse of minus 3 would be plus 3. So here, you just need to memorize that plus and minuses are in one group, and times and divide, they're in another group. Let's take a look at practice questions together. The instruction tells us to solve for x using a suitable inverse operation. So here, you'll need to know your inverses, which are plus and minus, they're inverses, and times and divide, they're inverses. Let's take a look at the first question. X plus 6 equals to 13. We're trying to look for the value for x. What is x to make this equation true? Now, for you to get to the answer where x equals to a number, you need to get rid of everyone around the x. For question number 1, you see that there is a plus 6. So you need to get rid of plus 6 first in order for x to equal to a certain number, and that would be the answer. The inverse of plus 6 is minus 6. So you would go x plus 6 minus 6. And to maintain balance, remember that you had to, if you are subtracting a number on one side, you also have to subtract on the other side. So you also have to minus 6 on the right-hand side. Plus 6 minus 6 equals to 0. So you can cancel out, and you're left with x on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, 13 minus 6 equals to 7. So therefore, x is equal to 7. Let's take a look at number 2. X minus 4 equals to negative 1. Now, here you'll need to find the inverse of minus 4 so that x will be left by itself in the end, equaling to a number. So, what is the inverse of minus 4? The inverse of minus 4 is plus 4. So you have to plus 4 on both sides. Minus 4 plus 4 equals to 0, so you can cancel it out, and that leaves you with the x that you want on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, you have minus 1 plus 4, and that equals to 3. So the answer for this problem would be x equals to 3. Let's take a look at number 3. We have 4x equals to 20. What does 4x mean? 4x means 4 times x. So what's the inverse of times by 4? It's divide by 4. So I would write 4x equals to 20, and I need to divide both sides by 4. So I would divide by 4. And on the left-hand side, I have 4 over 4, or 4 divided by 4, and that equals to 1. So it cancels out, and I am left with x. On the right-hand side, 20 over 4, or 20 divided by 4, equals to 5. So x equals to 5. Take a look at number 4. X over 7 is equal to negative 6. X over 7 means x divided by 7. What's an inverse of divide by 7? It is times 7. So I will first rewrite the equation that is already given to me and use my inverse on both sides, which was times 7. This gives me 7x over 7 equals to negative 42. 7 over 7 is equal to 1 because 7 divided by 7 is 1, so cancel out. And that gives me x on the left-hand side, and my x is equal to negative 42. Now, how do I know if these are true? Well, you can take your value of the x and just substitute into the equation. In number 1, we said x was equal to 7. Does 7 plus 6 give you 13? Yes, so I know this is correct. Number 2, we found out that x was 3. Does 3 minus 4 give us negative 1? Yes, this is also correct. In number 3, we found that x was 5. Does 4 times 5 give us 20? And yes, that is also true. And lastly, in number 4, we found that x was negative 42. Does negative 42 divided by 7 give us negative 6? And yes, it is all correct. Time for some independent work. I would like you to try and solve these 4 equations by yourself. You may wish to pause the screen while you work on these 4 questions. Now let's check the answers together. Number 1, x plus 4 equals to 10. The inverse of plus 4 is minus 4. So you have to minus 4 from both sides. Plus 4 minus 4 is 0, so you can cancel it out. And that leaves us with x on the left-hand side equals to 10 minus 4 is 6. Number 2, the inverse of minus 5 is plus 5. So from both sides of the equation, you will plus 5 on both sides. Minus 5 plus 5 equals to 0, so you cancel, and you're left with x equals to 6. Number 3, x over 8 equals to negative 4. The inverse of divide by 8 is times 8, so we will have to times 8 on both sides. So you'd go x over 8 equals to negative 4 and times 8 on both sides. 8x over 8 equals to negative 32. 8 divided by 8 gives us 1, so you can cancel it out. And that leaves us with x equaling to negative 32. And lastly, 20x equals to 60. What's an inverse of times 20 because 20x means 20 times x. The inverse of 20 times is 20. Divide by 20. So first I will rewrite my equation and divide both sides by 20. 20 divided by 20 is equal to 1, so you can cancel it out. And that gives us x equals to 30. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.